is yours.
Already mine. Okay, no intro.
No.
Very
Okay.
good. So then let me share my screen. All right. So hello, everyone. Probably a few words about myself first. My name is Kristian. I was asked to present today Power BI versioning topic to see how you can version within Power BI or outside of Power BI your Power BI artifacts. And for those who don't know me, I'm a so-called technical specialist for Power BI, sitting in Switzerland, working for Microsoft as such a TS or technical specialist. And yeah, and happy to present today Power BI versioning. One of the most important things in my view is if you have any kind of questions during the demo, feel free to unmute yourself, just interrupt me or put it into the chat. I will try to make some breaks in between to see if you have any questions. But yeah, as mentioned, feel free to just interrupt me. Happy to take them on the spot. All right, then let's start with versioning. Probably just a few words about what is versioning. So versioning refers to the use and management of multiple versions of a file. In a typical version, or the typical versioning was during my study when you had like, okay, this is my final thesis, and then you go, okay, final, but then you still have to do some changes. Then it's the final version 1, final version 2, and so on. So you copy the file and make names, funny names with the really final version. And at the end, you will get some kind of versioning history through the names of the file itself. And of course, this can be done with Power BI as well. But let me show you also some different, probably better ways to achieve the versioning with Power BI. So as mentioned, the first thing is you can copy and paste your reports. So as you can see in the screenshot right here, that you can have like my reports, then the report version 1, version 2, final, and so on. The beauty of this is it's unlimited. You can really go through and then create many kind of copies of a report. But the downside of this approach is that you will not have a difference analysis. Meaning if I go and create a first report, then a few days or a few weeks later on, I go copy this report and create some new pages, some new visuals, or modify some stuff. I will not have a diff analysis making sure what has changed, or I will not be able to see just on top of this name in this case what has changed from my current version to the previous version. Further, if you go and just copy your report or your file, you would also need to change the data source manually. So meaning if you're working with dev test prod environments or whatever kind of environments, you will always have to go and set up those data sources manually. And it's highly recommended to have a naming convention if you go with this approach to keep an overview. So in my little case, you see I have like my report at the beginning, but afterwards it's already a little bit hard to tell which one is really the final report. So if you go and copy it, probably it makes sense to have like a date or whatever to know which version is really the newest, the current version. But as mentioned, I totally do not recommend to go this way. This is just to show you that this is also possible, but absolutely not a recommended way. If we go with a versioning of PBX files, so the Power BI desktop files, it's a better approach to have a let's say a versioning service like OneDrive, probably SharePoint or anything else that takes care of this history automatically. Meaning, in my specific case, let me show that how it looks like. I have like one OneDrive folder, in this case the Microsoft one. In this OneDrive, I created under events up the Power BI break, and I have now one file, and this one file is always my current one. And if I need a history, so if I have to go back to see, okay, what has changed or what kind of changes did I made, I would like to restore it. All I can do is I can right click on my file, go to OneDrive, and I can see over here version history. And if I open that up, it's just one. Okay, it's just one because of course I just created the file to the I just copied the file today. But if I would now do some updates and save it afterwards, I will always have then the history over here. And lastly, I can just select one and say then restore it to have the latest version. This approach is a little bit better comparing it of copying all the time a new file, but there are still some downsides. Again, you do not have a diff analysis because, like in my screenshot again over here, we cannot see what has changed probably between those two files over here. All I can see it is that I modified it. It's like 19 hours ago, but what has been modified, what is new, what has been deleted probably is not visible really. So what I would need to do is I would need to restore it, open up the file, check what's in there, and see if this is what I'm looking for. Further, I have no way to comment any kind of changes. So probably if I delete a visual, there is a reason behind, so I cannot really comment on that reason. This is also a downside of this approach. And as you saw, I really need to know what I'm looking for, which kind of version I'm looking for. So I need to know in probably over here, which version of these three is really the version I'm looking for. And this is a little bit here, the challenge. I guess this is more or less pretty obvious. So let me go a little bit further then with a little bit a better approach with Power BI apps, because Power BI apps can also be some kind of versioning. Because on one hand, you have the workspace in which you can publish the reports. And on top of the workspace, you can create an app. And those two, let's say, different worlds can be independent, meaning that the Power BI app can be like the prod environment, and the Power BI workspace where the report lives can be your dev test environment, meaning that you can do all the changes. And once you're done, publish a new app or upgrade the app, and then the app will contain all these changes. Let me show you how that looks like. So if I go to my Power BI service, I'm logged in here in my demo environment. I have a workspace called Power BI Guy, and in this workspace, as you can see, I have some different kind of reports and data sets. And if you're not familiar with Power BI apps, just to mention 1-2 things, within the workspace itself, I can decide what should be included in an app. So just by ticking the box yes or no. And once done, I have at the top right here a button saying create an app. And this app, as mentioned, is like independent a little bit of the workspace when it comes to versioning. All it does, it takes all the reports and all the data sets depending on the report, and we'll package it into an app and publish it afterwards, which can be shared again with users so the people can access the reports. And how that looks like is if I hit here, create an app, I can call it Power BI whatever. I can give a description like this is my first Power BI app. I can have a support site and so on. I can also have a logo. If I go on the navigation at the top, and I can even decide, okay, which report is the first one, which is the second one, and so on. And lastly, I can decide which users or user groups have permission, what they are allowed to do. Are they allowed to build further reports on top of the data sets, and so on. And in my case, let's say I'm done. I say publish app. They publish. This will take a few seconds, up to 5 minutes, but let me try already to open it. Okay, looks like, because it's an easy one, it's already there. So, and the beauty of this is now that if I go back to Power BI service, I have still my workspace. As mentioned, I can still publish my reports in it, and if it changes something, this change will not be automatically visible in the app, because now every time I wish that it's visible in the app, I have to go at the top right and say update app and follow the same process again. And once updated, it will then be visible in the app. So therefore you have like these two kind of let's say environments, and having the two different versions, the workspace and the applet. And then you know how to access an app as well. You can directly through the link as you saw, or on the left-hand side, you have here apps. And I can already see here my app because I created it. But if you have a mechanism that users should go and get the app by their own, they can also say just here at the top right, get apps. Go to organizational apps and in there find it. I already have it installed, therefore it's not visible anymore. But if I wouldn't, I would see it over here. All right, make it a little pause. Any questions so far? Anything unclear? Doesn't look like so. Then let me switch back to the slides. Pretty easy approach with Power BI apps to have these two kind of environments as mentioned, but the same if you look for the Power BI files, the same is still true because it's in the service. The service itself do not have a history, meaning if you publish a new report, the existing report will just be overwritten and you cannot go back, meaning you would still need like a versioning of the PBIX files somehow, meaning that if you go with OneDrive, for example, as showed before, so would be a good approach to have this combination of having the PBX file in OneDrive as a versioning and then publishing it in the workspace and have an app on top of it to have these two kind of, let's say, test and prod environments. As of today, the app itself has to be updated manually, if I'm not wrong. I think there is still no API yet, meaning there is a little bit of a manual process behind, and you do not have a middle stage, meaning if you're looking for dev, test, prod, it's with Power BI apps, it's not there because you will have just one workspace, one environment, which is the dev, let's say, and then going all automatically to the prod environment with the Power BI apps. Then moving on, what can be done as well is you can have different kind of workspaces to have or to achieve the dev, test, prod approach. And you can do so manually, meaning that instead of having now, like in my case, PBI guy, I can have PBI guy dev, PBI guy test, PBI prod, and then publish my different reports into the different kind of workspace depending on which stage it is, and therefore having then really this environment like with dev, test, and prod. This can be done manually. You can also publish it through APIs if you wish to do so, probably with PowerShell, for example, and having like an automatism for the CI/CD approach, for this continuous improvement approach. A little bit the downside here is, again, you have to take care of the data sources, meaning you would need to change the data source if you're working with dev, test, prod data sources as well. Of course, it can be parameterized, but you have to keep an eye on it and make sure that once you publish it from dev to test or from test to prod, that the data source is updated as well. And naming convention for the workspaces, again, pretty important. I would recommend something like having, if I go back here, having the data, the workspace name at the beginning, and then afterwards having something like dev test, and prod, so that the 3 workspaces will always be in an order. Otherwise, if you have like dev underline Power BI guy and then test underline Power BI guy and have different kind of workspaces, they will not be in an order, meaning that you would need to look up which is the right workspace. So please keep that in mind and have then a proper naming convention in place. Whole process can also be more automated with Power BI Premium and with the Power BI deployment pipelines. This is a feature which will take care of this publishing process going from one workspace to another, so from a developer workspace to a test workspace and then to a prod workspace. It's, as mentioned, a premium feature, but the beauty of this is it's really automated, and you just have to push a button to do so, or probably call an API to push it from one to another workspace. Further, it can be more parameterized, meaning that once you're publishing it from a dev workspace into a test workspace, that you can really override also a parameter like a data source and automatically make sure that you're connecting to the right data source behind. One little downside of this approach is that if you're working with sensitivity labels, this is not supported yet. I know that we're working on to make it available as well during this deployment pipeline process, but it's, as of today, as I'm not wrong, it's still not supported. And you have to keep in mind that if you, for example, create a file, publish it to the Power BI developer workspace, and then automatically push it into the test workspace, that you cannot download the file anymore from here. And same, of course, if you publish it afterwards to the prod environment, that you cannot download this file here anymore. Meaning you have to make sure that the file created at the first place is available to you, so that you store it like in a OneDrive folder or wherever. Because once you automate something through XMLA in Power BI, the report itself cannot be downloaded anymore. So that as well, how it looks like if I go to my Power BI service Microsoft environment, I have here a workspace called PPU KB. PPU stands for Power BI Premium per user. And I have on the left-hand side deployment pipelines. And from here, I created one pipeline called KB test. And if I select it, we can see that I have automatically the 3 stages: development, test, prod. And in my development, my PPU KB workspace is assigned. For my test one, it automatically created one because I didn't assign specifically a workspace. So it created automatically a workspace with the same name and test at the end. And for my productive environment, I didn't assign any workspace yet. Therefore, I can select here one if I wish to do so, or I can also just let Microsoft create our workspace for me with the same name and prod in the brackets. What else do I see from here is what kind of artifacts I have in there with the numbers. So I see 0 data flows, 9 data sets, 7 reports, and 1 dashboard. And in my test environment, same, but less data sets, reports, and so on. And what I can do now is I can start here to compare the 2 workspaces. And what it found is following. There are 1 report which will be deleted, 7 reports which are new, and 3 reports which has differences. For example, this sales analysis, there are some differences between the dev and the test one. Meaning that the dev workspace is the leading one and the sales analysis in my test workspace will be overwritten. We see here, for example, is that the prediction report is not available in my test environment or my test workspace. Therefore, it will be created in the test environment. And if I scroll down, I can see following as well that I have one report in my test workspace, which doesn't exist in my dev workspace. And therefore, this will be deleted because the dev, the left one, is always the leading one. And what I can do now is I can say deploy to test, and everything from the left will be deployed to right. But I can also just go and say, okay, instead of deploying everything, I just wish to deploy, for example, my sales analysis. So I'm selecting here the data set and say deploy to test. And Power BI makes me aware that I just selected one item, my sales analysis, and I say, yes, this is what I'm looking for, say continue. And now in the backend, it will be published into my test environment, copying this one item. And once done, I will get a message. There you go. We can see deployment completed, and my sales analysis dataset is already published to my test environment. And this is also some kind of versioning because at the beginning I have a different version in my dev environment than in my test environment, and because I didn't assign a prod environment so far, I would also have a third environment with a third version if I would have a production environment in this case. Any questions to deployment pipelines? Why versioning and deployment pipelines is a thing?
I guess not.
All right. All right, then let me move on with a little bit more and more techy stuff. So first of all, Git. Let me just introduce what Git is if you didn't know or haven't heard so far. So Git is a worldwide standard for version control. So pretty good when you work with different kind of files, especially in programming languages. Meaning that, for example, if you look at the picture here below, let's say you start, the other way around, you start with your file, created it, and go on and say, okay, you did some changes and so on, and then after a while, someone else is working on the same file as you, and this other person just have to do some small changes in the whole file itself. They can then create a so-called branch, go the upper path in this case, add probably 2 features, and then commit this change again to the main node. It still says master in this picture, but nowadays it's called main, not master anymore, meaning that you merge these changes from the upper branch with your main file. And the beauty of this approach is that you will always see the differences, what exactly has happened, and you can work, for example, locally on your version and then commit it into the original one or the server version one, and everyone is then working really always on the same version. And why is Git so important? Because as mentioned, the standard itself is very important, and there are different kind of tools which supports this standard. And one of the most popular one is the GitHub. And GitHub is an open source control provider, which is, as mentioned, using this Git standard, so it can be used to track automatically your changes. But there is a big but in this case. PBX files or PBIT files are not supported to track the differences and or see what exactly has changed. I will show you with JSON file how it could look like, or a BIM file how it could look like, and what happens with the PBX file. because the PBX file is a little bit of a special kind, let's say, and therefore Git doesn't recognize it, and you can just upload it and have it as is with no diff analysis. Nevertheless, it's still a good idea to have the PBX files in a GitHub repo, to have it stored locally so that everyone can use it and have the single source of truth. And if you go for this approach to store your files in a GitHub, here is a little tip. Save your Power BI files as template files, because in such a case, no data is loaded in the file itself, and the file will be much smaller, and you will save space in this case. The downside of this is, again, if you open the template and you wish to work then with the report and create a relationship and the data, of course, you would first need to refresh and get the data into the file if you're working with import mode, meaning for the every time you open it, you will have a little bit of waiting time to get the data into the Power BI file. Another tip is you can save your data model of Power BI as a BIM file separately, and then separately save the BIM file again into the GitHub repo. And the beauty of this approach is that the BIM file itself is recognized by GitHub, and you can then do this diff analysis. So let me show you what I mean in this case. So I have here in my OneDrive two files. One, the PBX file, which is my demo report, really just a simple one. I can open it in a second. And I have my separated model as BIM file saved. And if I go and open the report, let me do 2-3 changes. Once opened, whilst opening, any questions so far? Anything unclear?
I guess not. So it's very clear.
Okay, that's okay. All right, then let me make it a little bit bigger. So, okay, takes a little bit longer than expected, but we'll be there in a sec or two. So there we are. As mentioned, it's just a demo report, not my best work, but at least some kind of report. And just to have something different, let me extend here my KPIs. Let me go to my test DAX and say, okay, my revenue multiplied by 100 instead of 10, just to have something different. And save that. And now, if I go to GitHub, in my GitHub, I have, as you see, these two files uploaded as well. It's been a while, but this is my Power BI file. This is my BIM file. And instead of creating now a branch and commit the branch, I will just upload it into the main one. And how it looks like, again, pretty easy. Just gonna upload it over here. And what we see now
Excuse me, am I supposed to see in your GitHub screen? Because I'm just in your Power BI screen, not the GitHub screen.
All right. Is it just you? Does anybody else see my?
No, I can see your GitHub screen.
Okay.
It's just me then.
Then you know what? Let me reshare my screen. Probably it's an issue with Teams. So I'm gonna stop sharing and share again.
It is not working. You can join us again. Maybe it's a bug or something.
So do you see now a more or less blacky screen? My browser with the GitHub opened.
Yeah. Drag files here to take into the repository. It's all fine now.
Okay, great.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Then let me show that again. As you see, I'm logged in in GitHub. I have my two files in here, and all I did is I just moved my pbx file in there. And what it does now is it just uploads it. And all I can do is I can have here a description. So I can say, okay, I added or I changed my KPI, multiplied by 100 now instead of 10, to have at least some kind of commenting feature of what has happened with my file. And I can commit it directly into my main branch, which is okay in this case. Or as mentioned, I can also create a new branch and then afterwards commit it into the main one. But I go just for the main branch, say commit changes, takes a few seconds, and bam, it's there. And we can also see, hey, it has just been updated now. And if I click on it, I don't see any kind of really differences or whatever. I can also go to the history to see what has happened when, but I never see a diff analysis because, as mentioned, the PBIX file is not really supported in this case. But let me do the same with the model. So for those who don't know how to save the model separately, with Power BI, you can work with external tools to a little bit tweak your model or DEX or any kind of third-party tools that helps to make your Power BI experience better, let's say. And one of the most interesting and, from my point of view, most important external tools are for sure the Tabular and the Editor and DEX Studio, and probably the ALM Toolkit. I will have a look into it just in a few seconds as well. And in my case, I go and open Tabular Editor. And once you installed it, it's a free open source tool, which has a licensing fee as well. The version 3 has now a licensing behind, but the version 2 dot something is freely available. So once you installed it, you have to reopen Power BI Desktop and it will be automatically in the ribbon external tools. And if I open Tabular Editor from here, the benefit of it is if I open it directly from the desktop, it's automatically connected to my data model behind, so I do not have to connect manually to it. What does it mean is if I scroll in, oh, that was the wrong button, sorry. If I scroll in here, you can see that I have 3 tables, sales, country, and KPIs, and I have the same tables in my Power BI desktop file because, as mentioned, I'm connected to the same model. And this model at the end is nothing else than a description of what kind of fields you have, what kind of relationship the tables have in between, and so on and so on. And this can be saved, as mentioned, in a so-called BIM file. And to do so, I just go to File, Save As, and just gonna copy here the path to have the same path. And I'm gonna overwrite now my model.bim file. And I saved now purely the model itself. And if I go now back to GitHub, I'm working here with the online version, but you can also install GitHub to have it a little bit easier. And if I pull now my BIM file into GitHub, I can again go and say, okay, this is my newest version, and say commit changes. If I go now into it, I'm a little bit surprised that there are no differences tracked. Probably I had really the same changes. Okay, let me do that again. Sorry for that. I think I have to change my test KPI one more time so that I have really a difference. Hit save. And just refresh. Or let me reopen. So KPIs test. Okay, multiplied by 15. Save as, one more time, model. So, all right. And now what I'm trying to show is following. Okay, to be honest, I expected that I will see changes. I'm not sure why I don't see it. If I go in here, if I go into the history, say view at this point in history. Okay. Usually, I really don't know what I'm missing right now. Usually, once you upload the file, you can see the changes from the file that is already in GitHub and the file that you're uploading. And it will be marked as green, what's new, and red, what's deleting, or what is changing, so that you have an overview from the beginning what's happening with your file. I'm not sure what I'm missing right now, why I'm not seeing it, but this is the whole idea of a GitHub repo, to have it in one place, and once you're changing something, that you have it in there as well. I guess probably I have to create a branch, and then within the branch to combine it or to merge it and then to see it. But I will try that out one more time and put it into the slide so that you have at least a screenshot of how it should look like.
We have one question in the chat from Donald. Save in tabular editor, what is the question? So I guess the question is, did you save it in the tabular editor or otherwise?
Yes, yeah, I did so. I can see it over here that it's by 15 and I saved it as well. I overwrite it. I'm really not sure why I do not see the changes. Okay. Any further questions? Does look like okay. So, and when it comes to versioning, this is a little bit then the better approach to have, as mentioned, like a main single source of truth, main branch within your GitHub repo, and publishing your new changes into it through a branch, and have then the version control and have a history of it. Because if I go to my model, just click on it, I will always have here the history button, which I can click and then go back to a history that I'm looking for example, and say, okay, browse the repository at this point in history, click on it, and I can always see, okay, this is how my model looked like. Yes, this is probably the better one or whatever, and then just recall it from there and have it as the current file. As mentioned, I also would like to show another third-party tool, which is the ALM Toolkit. ALM stands for Application Lifecycle Management Toolkit. And what this does is it can connect to two different data sets. For example, from your Power BI desktop and a data set sitting in a Power BI service workspace. And what it does then is it will compare the two data models, and you can push the differences from the source to the target afterwards. And how that looks like is, let me just connect to, let me connect to it. So I go to Power BI Service. I go to my workspace and say settings and say premium and say copy. Go back to ALM, put in here my workspace and have to log in, of course, Microsoft account. And the drop down will show me all my data sets. I go for the connect to folder combined with flow data set and hit OK. It's loading, and once loaded, there it is. I can now say compare my, or already did so. I can now, once loaded, it compared my Power BI desktop model with the data model in the service. And on the right-hand side, I can see the different kind of actions. Skip means it's already there and it has the same structure, so nothing has changed. Create means I added something new in the source which is not available in the target. And delete is the opposite, meaning there is something in the target which doesn't exist in the source, so I have to delete it. And there is as well update function. If you update, for example, a KPI, you will have the action update. In my case, no update because it looks like nothing has changed, which was already there. What you can do now with it is you can say validate the selection, and then it will go through all the create, update, and delete statements and test if it's possible to perform the changes on the target source. If so, you will get like the information, like in this case, you can hit OK, and once done, you can hit now the update button, and the target source will be updated. On the other hand, you can also generate a script to automate this process so that you can really then script and update the target source automatically through this JSON file, which is at the end generated. Further, instead of having the changes from all the different kind of create, delete, and updates actions, you can also say, okay, instead of having my new test measure, I don't wish to create it in my target yet. I can just say, please skip this. So I select it on the right-hand side, say skip, and this action will be skipped. And if I wish to check what exactly is happening, I can always select one field or table and see at the bottom what's exactly happening. On the left-hand side, we can see how this measure is created or what kind of definition it has. On the right-hand side, it's empty because it's not there. So therefore, it will be created. And if I would now say, okay, instead of these three, I would have to, I wish to skip all threes. I just wish to delete the revenue as measure. I can go and say, validate it again. Will be validated. And once done, I can update it and my measure will be deleted then in the data source. This is again a little bit an easier way of controlling your data sets and have the same version control. So having your development in Power BI Desktop and push it more or less in a semi-automatic way into Power BI service. But again, keep in mind, if you go this way, you will not be able to download the PBIX file from the service anymore because you update it through the XMLA endpoint. And therefore, no download possible anymore. All right. I also included 2 or 3 slides about the tabular editor, where to download it, how to save it as a BIM file. Same goes for ALM Toolkit, what it is, how to download it, and how to use it. And I have a better together section, meaning that, for example, if you create your Power BI file within Power BI Desktop, you can save the model as BIM file in a GitHub repo, save it over there, and then with the ALM Toolkit, push the changes into the data source or into the data set in Power BI service. One last tip when it comes to Power BI data sets, you can also perform backups if you have Power BI Premium in the through SQL Server Management Studio, for example, in an automatic way. And to be able to do so, you would need to connect your workspace with the Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2. And once done, you can then connect with SQL Server Management Studio, for example, and perform just a backup like you do with Azure Analyze Services and restore it, of course, as well. And the bug files at the end, they will be saved in your ADL Gen 2 account. So let me show that quickly. What's required. So again, back in my Power BI service, in my workspace, I have on the right-hand side my Azure connection. Everything is set up, so therefore I can see it. My data flow storage is on in there. And once everything is set up, you can go to SQL Server Management Studio, say connect to an analyze services, and really connect then to your workspace. And this is the URL. If I go back to my workspace from settings, from premium, you can just copy here this workspace connection. And once you connect it, you will see, like in my case over here, the different data sets as analyze services database at the end. And if you wish now to create a backup, you can right click on a data set, say backup, give it a name, something like, I don't know, OLS test. Let's keep that 2020, 21, and say, okay, password not provided. Oh, I need a password. No password. So, yeah, me neither. I know. See it in the chat. I never use password. Me neither. So, and once done, it's already saved. And there are two ways to check it. One way is if I right click again, instead of backup, I just use restore now. I can say browse. And I open here my folder. And once done, you will see that my newest file is in here. And the second approach, how you can confirm that you have really created the backup, is if I go to Azure, to my storage account, I have here now a Power BI backup folder or container, my workspace, PPUKB. And within this workspace, I can really see that my newest backup has been just created a few seconds ago, and it's really in there. And because it's in my storage account, I can now download this file and store it on premise or locally if I wish to do so, and have this file and do whatever I wish with it at the end. And of course, just to mention that as well, if you wish to restore it, I think you just saw the process before. Just say here restore, browse to the file you need and restore it, and you will have that model from the version that you wish to restore at the end. Any questions to this approach? I see another way to test with a restored version with different name. If Donald, do you mean like if you have a different, giving just a different name to see it automatically, or what do you mean with it?
Yeah, just you could restore the database with a different name for like a test database or something.
Sure. Yeah, sure. That's for sure. Yeah, just restore it with a different name, and there you go. All right, taking likely 5 more minutes with the last approach, Azure DevOps. This is like the holy grail, let's say, when it comes to versioning CI/CD at the end, because through Azure DevOps, you can really automate more or less the whole process. So instead of having it manually and restore backup and push differences and whatever, you can have Azure DevOps to automate those kind of stuff. Let's say that the best way or the pros of it is obvious. It's more automated. It's once set up, everything is faster at the end, comparing it to doing it manually. The downside of it is you have to know Azure DevOps, of course, and you have to be familiar with it and create it in first place and making sure that everything works as it should. I'm not really the Azure DevOps professional, but I know DataMark, and DataMark has some really, really great tutorials which are walking you through how to set up versioning with CI/CD with Azure DevOps. He has also a really great explanation why you should care about Azure DevOps and when to use Power BI deployment pipelines, when to use Azure DevOps. And if you go further through his blog, he has also some really great stuff, how to even integrate deployment pipelines with Azure DevOps, and so on and so on. Just here a little overview of how many articles he wrote already about this topic. I will share these links as well with you afterwards or in the chat probably, so that you have it as well. From my point of view, this is really the best source I know when you wish to work with DevOps and Power BI deployment pipelines or Power BI CI/CD in general. So with that, that was really my last slide. Are there any questions? Anything that we should cover that is unclear? Anything?
Kristian?
Yes.
Do you know the PBI tools? Have you seen that?
Not so far, no.
It's a cool thing. I think Matthias is also on the call. He built this tool, and it's a command line tool where you can extract every artifact from the PBIX file, and he's able to compile them back. And so you are now can compare the reports, and yes, it's the site, and
Okay.
it make it possible that you can compare your whole file with a versioning part. Yeah.
Okay, that's pretty neat. I will definitely have a look into it. I wasn't aware of it so far. Cool. Okay, thanks for the hint.
Yeah. Thanks for your presentation.
Sure, sure. Hope it was okay, not too techy or too boring.
No. I have another problem. If you use the part that you can integrate your SharePoint file directly to the Power BI service, I never found a way to find out in the service which PBX file from the SharePoint is connected to this service. Do you know what I mean? You can go to the service and say, okay, import the PBIX file from a SharePoint list or a SharePoint place. And after you have imported the file, you get no information in a Power BI where is the source for this synchronization of the PBI. So,
yeah, I see. Yeah, there, I don't know neither because yeah, there is just no information then.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I guess
Doesn't
not.
look like everyone is just waiting that we finish.
Maybe. So thank you for the presentation. It was very interesting.
Yeah, thank you very much for it.
Yep,
Sure.
Thanks. Good stuff. I got to do DevOps someday, but I'm like you. I don't feel like messing with it right now.
Yeah.
Great. So I will stop the recording and